It's Super Valis on Super Nintendo. And that's about the only thing super about it. Super Valis IV, released in 1992 for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System courtesy of Atlas and Telnet and Lasersoft and whoever, is based on the fourth game in the Valis series, and that's about the extent of it. I've heard this comparison made elsewhere, and it kinda sorta fits, in that Super Valis IV is the Valis IV what Castlevania Dracula X is the Rondo of Blood. You've got a Super NES title that follows a similar plot and uses some of the same assets, but is an entirely different game that is missing some key features from the PC Engine release. However, while Dracula X can be generously perceived as Rondo at home, at least most of the core gameplay remain the same. You really can't make the same claim with Super Valis, as it might share some assets from Valis IV, but the gameplay is actually quite distinct from its PC Engine counterpart, for better or worse. Before we go any further, it's worth noting that Super Valis can be played on the third Valis collection that was released in 2024, which is where they pulled together as much of the dregs as they could before calling it a day, because what's left of Valis that you could put on another collection that's actually worth playing? However, if you have a Nintendo Switch Online subscription, or whatever they're calling it nowadays, Super Valis IV is available to sample on the Nintendo Classics SNES service, which means that we can play it in English. Not that it really means anything, because Super Valis is lacking in the cutscenes that was a hallmark of the series. No, really, you get the most bare bones of plot at the beginning, and that's about it. Maybe one cutscene down the road, and an ending, and a couple pictures when you clear a stage. Meh. In Super Valis IV, you assume control of Resistance fighter Lena on her journey to take on the demon forces of Gallagher. Yes, they named their main villain Gallagher, at least in the English version, which is a step down from other Demon King names like Glames or Megas or King Captain Steve Rogels. Whereas in Valis IV, Lena had two other characters to aid her in her journeys, Super Valis makes Lena a solo act, which you assume means, hooray, she's a complete character like Yuko was, except not really. Lena doesn't have Yuko's high jumps, she doesn't even have to slide anymore. However, double tapping a direction allows her to break into a sprint, which can be useful for clearing wider jumps, and you'll want to practice this as much as possible because it's a vital move of progression. Lena's standard attack is a basic sword swipe. Simple, basic, nothing special. You do have a basic projectile that can be shot by pressing up and Y, and you have unlimited shots, which is nice. Super Valis ditches Valis IV's magic system, or whatever you want to call it, and replaces it with a simple inventory system, where you can pick up emblems along the way and add them to your inventory box. Cycle through your emblems with the L and R buttons and activate by pressing X to replace your stock projectile with whatever emblem you selected, whether it be wide shot, spread shots, shield, or even health restoration. These items have limited shots and cannot be stacked. You pick up two of the same item, they take up 2 slots, and you pick up an emblem with a full inventory, the leftmost emblem is dropped to make room for the new one you just picked up. Super Valis IV has no traditional healing items, no hearts to restore your health on pickup or anything of the sort, which means your only means of healing are the heart emblems as well as the minor health boost you get after clearing a stage. And then there's the boss meter, something we've seen countless times before that often serves no purpose other than to take up space on screen, except in Super Valis IV. That boss meter starts off half empty, but fills up in increments over time. Basically, the more time you spend on a level, the more life the boss accumulates. So while you might be tempted to explore as much of a stage as possible to gather those emblems, you're also giving the boss time to gather strength. And some of these boss fights can be a bit of a struggle, especially towards the latter half of the game. Oh, and die once and it's game over. You only get one life. You do have unlimited continues, which is a blessing, but you restart at the beginning of the current stage. No checkpoints, and it's one and done. No passwords, no save system. So yeah, it's a bit of a pickle, this one, and for what it's worth, there is a code that apparently lets you play as Yuko, but it's just a palette swap of Lena. There's no real difference in gameplay or performance, it's just another set of colors and that's it. Don't get too excited over this prospect, you're not really getting anything different besides what you already have. So yes, in comparison to the PC Engine Valis IV, Super Valis is missing stuff, generally doesn't hold up, and is obviously the lesser product. Let's get that out of the way right now. But even on its own merits, the game really isn't all that special. It's merely okay. The core gameplay is alright, I like the inventory setup, a bit of a novel idea there, and also a bit of a balancing act in managing your power-ups once you filled your 6 slots. Controls are fairly responsive, the jumping feels fine, it's easy to pick up and play. The idea of the boss gaining strength the longer you linger in a level is an interesting concept. Again, a balancing act between searching these levels for emblems to stock up on versus speeding through them as quickly as possible to catch the bosses at their weakest point. Every 10,000 points your life bar increases, which is nice. See, there's stuff I like about Super Valis either conceptually or even in execution, but at the same time, it's not a game that I particularly enjoy playing. The whole one life, game over, continue from scratch thing is a bit of a deal breaker for me, especially since some of these levels can drag quite a bit and overstay their welcome. Coincidentally, it's a similar issue that I had with the actual Valis IV. The power-ups you use in this game are kinda stock generic, nothing really special, but really the biggest takeaway for me is that the ironically titled Super Valis feels like a shallow entry. A pale imitation of a typical 16-bit Valis game, missing some of the trademarks of those particular entries. Not just the extra characters, but also stuff like the slide or the sword upgrades that gave the gameplay a bit of flavor. You take these away and you're left with gameplay that's rather vanilla, plain, functional, but not very exciting. And that's usually when a game's flaws become much more apparent. So visually speaking, Super Valis looks pretty good for the most part. In comparison to the PC Engine version, whatever characters and sprite work were nicked from that game made the transition rather nicely, and without much loss in detail or coloring, maybe some differences in animation frames, but nothing overly major I think. There are some nice looking set pieces that you fight through and the added parallax helps a bit. Well, up until the Red Moon stages, which look as bad as they did in the PC Engine version. And while you don't get much of those sweet cutscenes that made the Valis series something of a staple, you do get these quick shots after each stage clear and they look fine, I guess, I suppose. On another high note, Super Valis does have some pretty sweet tunes from start to finish, and yeah, I'm sorry, Valis 4 may have more stuff, nice CD Red Book audio and all that, but the music in Super Valis is much better. Just a stronger, more catchier collection of tunes from start to finish. Opening cutscene has a tense theme that's suitable for the setting, first stage has a smooth, jazzy touch to it, Babylon's got a punchier melody. Hell, there's only 6 or 7 stages in this game and all of them have their own stage theme, and they're mostly great. Sound effects are fine, punchier, livelier, no vocal bits, but I don't think you're missing those outside of the cutscenes that are also missing. Overall, Super Valis 4 on Super Nintendo is okay, I guess. It plays well enough, it has some neat ideas, and the soundtrack's kinda sweet, but the lack of lives and checkpoints makes the game stiffer than it should be, the gameplay in general is rather bland, and forget comparisons to Valis 4. As an entry in the wider Valis series that includes various computer releases and Mega Drive iterations, this is simply an underwhelming entry because you don't have the cutscenes that gave that series its charm and personality. It's just a no-frills, plain Jane, no pun intended, action platformer that you could have easily called anything else and it would not have mattered. And that's perhaps Super Valis' biggest sin. It is entirely disposable fare that really doesn't stand out. And it wouldn't have either if it weren't for the simple fact that, assuming you ignore the ill-conceived descent into full-blown hentai tentacle porn that would come along in 2006, this would be the final proper game in the Valis series to see release until the compilations came along in 2019, I believe. This is how they chose to end the series. Not with a bang, but with a bit of a whimper. And again, I will stress, Super Valis is not a bad game. On its own, it's perfectly okay. It plays fine as a throwaway platformer. And honestly, I'd much rather play this over the Famicom Valis or any of the original computer versions, so it's got that much going for it at least. But as a coda to the Valis franchise in its prime years, the final chapter as it were, Super Valis doesn't quite live up to its name, and that is a shame. A shame that, at the very least, is relatively family friendly.